Hi, this is Matt Towers with CPA.com, here with another one of our interviews of real stories of firm innovation and assurance. Here today, excited to be here today with Rich Goode from Ernst & Young. Rich, welcome.
Thanks, Matt.
Yep, thanks for joining me. So again, the subject matter here being innovation. I think we're going to talk about some things that are maybe new opportunities for firms today in a particular area that you hold near and dear to your heart. But before we get into the nitty gritty of all that, maybe you can just take a moment to explain a little bit more about your role at Ernst & Young and just introduce yourself to everybody.
Sure. Thanks, Matt. Glad to be here today with you. So I'm a managing director at Ernst & Young in our climate change and sustainability services practice. So what does that mean? So really our practice, we're a specialty practice within the firm where quite some time ago, our clients came to us and said, hey, can you help us understand the sustainability and environmental and social governance issues that are out there? And the firm actually started to build this practice about 10, 12 years ago here in the US and longer in other places. And really what they've asked us to do is, and what we do for our clients is help understand this new ESG landscape or sustainability. So ESG, environment, social, and governance. Sort of think of it as sort of the new language of sustainability. And the work that we do here in our climate change and sustainability services practice is designed to assist our clients in understanding that landscape and report on a way that really meets all of their key stakeholder needs. So not just investors, but customers, employees, suppliers, regulators across the board, and really helps them tell their story their way when it comes to sustainability and other ESG related issues.
Sure. I'm glad that you explained ESG because the acronym policeman in me wanted to say, oh, come on, you can't use acronyms like that. But as it relates to sustainability, I think it's a good idea for the audience here who's listening in, who may or may not have much of a background in understanding sustainability or what it is or why they should care. I think it'd be good to maybe dive into that a bit more. So if you don't mind doing that for a few minutes here to set the context, I think it would be helpful.
Sure. So sustainability at its most basic really means using resources in a way today that ensures future generations will be able to use and benefit from those resources as well. But making that more practical, what does it mean for a company? Really, it's an opportunity to thrive in perpetuity is the way I see it. Meaning being able to use resources more efficiently, not only just waste, water, greenhouse gas, what I call the usual suspects around sustainability, using less energy, changing your light bulbs and using low flow water sensors and all that sort of really become baseline. If you're not doing that, you're just leaving money on the table. Sustainability started out as that, just sort of using resources more wisely, but really it's morphed into this idea of risk and opportunity. So by sustainability and the larger environmental, social, and governance, what we really mean by that is understanding your environmental impact, but also understanding the other key things that affect your business, like social issues. Let's take here in the United States, diversity and inclusion and social equity and racial justice. These are social issues that are not just something that's there in the front page of the newspaper every day. It's an important issue for companies to understand. How does this affect my employees, the talent that we're trying to hire? How does it affect how I market to my customers? How does it affect my relationship with regulators? And then the governance issues is really, around how do we run our business? Do we understand the risks and opportunity that climate change may impact our business? If you're a company that makes steel, or if you're a company that makes soft drinks and food and beverage industry, if you're in the retail or airline industry, how do these things impact my business and what should we do about it? So sustainability has really morphed from this idea of just using resources more efficiently to one of really being strategic in how a company even considers and runs its business.
Interesting. In the quest to go green, so to speak, for companies, that as you've mentioned, this idea that it morphed from simply, hey, let's be more environmentally conscious, to really understanding like what are the risks and kind of the long-term implications of the decisions we're making as it relates to um, uh, climate change and how we operate as a business. So with the kinds of, with the clientele that Ernst & Young has, clearly you mentioned things like soft drink companies. I'm kind of wondering too, when we start looking at the broader implication to the profession. I know when we had talked prior to this interview, just briefly, you mentioned the Larry Fink letter, which I'm not sure if everyone who's listening will be familiar with the letter, but you put it in the same breath as Dodd-Frank, which was immediately to me, I'm like, whoa, okay, so this is kind of a serious position you're taking on here. And so I think it'd be a good idea to talk about what do you mean by that? Like the idea that this Larry Fink letter could have this sort of landmark moment for the profession. Maybe you can tell me more, because that's a pretty bold statement, if you ask me.
It sure is. And if I could maybe back up a little bit, big institutional investors, all the big type investors that are out there, they invest in all sorts of companies, and they want to understand what are the material issues for that company. And most companies have, in their management discussion and analysis, here are the key issues that impact our business. So you see things like competition, you see things like currency, you see things like their supply chain.
Sure.
What you're starting to see more and more is companies saying, well, maybe climate change is a material impact to our business. I mean, look at major utility in California that actually went bankrupt due to the wildfires out there. So from an investor standpoint, they're kind of saying, well, wait a minute, it seems like this climate change thing might actually be a material risk. So that letter that I talked about really is a major investor, holds $9 trillion in assets under management, sending a letter out to companies saying, look, we don't really care whether or not you believe in climate change, but we just really want to understand, does climate related issues potentially impact your business in risks or opportunities? Let's not forget, not all risks are bad, right? Some risks are good opportunities.
Sure.
And they cited a framework that you could use to actually take you through the process of understanding those risks and opportunities. If you look a little deeper at the framework, and this gets back to your question, why this letter could be as important as Dodd-Frank or even Sarbanes-Oxley,
right.
It's because climate-related risk and sustainability and ESG has always kind of been this separate issue from a company. Here's our core operations, and here's the sustainability thing. Yeah, it's important, and we reduce our impact and so forth, but it's not really core material to our operations. The view now is that it may not be greenhouse gas emissions. It may be social issues. It may be supply chain issues, human rights issues in your supply chain. Australia just passed a recent human rights law that all companies are going to have to investigate and report on human rights issues in their supply chain. UK has had the Modern Slavery Act in place for a while. California even has unique requirements just around one narrow issue in the realm of ESG. So with the idea that climate-related risk and other ESG risks are just simply risks, don't look at them separately. Again, these investors have not suddenly become climate activists. They're still very much taking this from an investor viewpoint, meaning, are these risks important to the companies that I'm investing in? And then will they impact the returns? I mean, no one would ever buy stock in a company that doesn't report their earnings, right? And then have them assured by a CPA. So it's kind of becoming the same issue. And why I think this is so impactful is where these large institutional investors are asking companies to report on climate-related risks and opportunities. If it approaches the level of financial materiality, meaning this risk is so important that it could actually impact our ability to meet our earnings expectations and our other goals, then it should be talked about in your management, in your 10K, listed in your mainstream financial statements, and receive the same level of assurance that your finances do. That's a big jump, right?
Sure.
That's a big jump from issuing a sustainability report to putting it in your mainstream financials. And that's where this is going. So that's how I see this impacting the profession over time, where people are going to have to get more comfortable with assurance of non-financial information.
Yeah, and there are other non-financial opportunities that I know have been uh, growing pretty tremendously. SOC comes to mind as one of those. But to keep kind of take a moment on this subject of sustainability and the non-financial related elements that kind of go into the assurance services, if you will. How might a firm take a simple action or a step that can begin to capitalize on this? It doesn't necessarily mean the firm themselves has to develop a sustainability practice, but their clients, they may have clients with a need, right? So what could they do to potentially guide or steer somebody who might have that need?
Mm-hmm. There's an old saying that 80 or 90% of life is just showing up. My corollary to that is 80 to 90% of your success is just reading the bloody regulations, right?
Sure.
So there, I call it the alphabet soup of ESG. There's the Global Reporting Initiative, the GRI. There's the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, that's SASB, Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosure, TCFD. My advice is look, you don't have to run out and hire 20 new ESG consultants if you're a small firm. You really just start to read these. It's not really rocket science. It's just understanding that this is a new risk landscape. We can see with our own eyes that the climate is changing, and that changing climate impacts certain industries more than others. Telecommunications infrastructure assets. Think of even resort operators. I have a conversation later with someone who's talking about the amount of snowfall and should they buy a resort. So just really sort of fundamental issues about my assets and investments. Understanding this risk landscape. The WBCSD has also issued a nice report on integrating ESG related risks into enterprise risk management. So this is the ultimate alphabet soup, but if you actually Google search WBCSD, ESG, and ERM, you'd find that report. And that's a really good framework for kind of helping to understand that level of risk around ESG and integrated it into core enterprise risk management.
Alphabet soup, Rich. Here we go. So that's actually that's really good in terms of awareness. I know for many listening, this is a really new subject for them potentially, or it's one in which they maybe haven't gotten much more than their toe in the water on. And this again ties in with this idea of firm innovation and assurance, because as firms are looking at ways they can have a more of an advisory role and kind of step away from being very compliance driven. I think this absolutely is a good example of that, actually. So maybe a final question for you or thought that I have is around the subject of innovation. And so just when you kind of look at the opportunity around sustainability and how innovation sort of maybe even sparked it in the first place, do you have any kind of just sort of final thoughts or real kind of capstone ideas around how firms can look at innovation in a similar way?
Mm-hmm. I do, and I think what spurred EY to even expand into this area was simply having conversations with our clients, asking clients about what's important, what's keeping you up at night, and where are things going. So I think in terms of innovation, there have been a lot of trailblazers out there in the standards bodies that have come up with these ESG related frameworks that our clients can follow. I think innovation really starts with understanding understanding what is the issue. So talking to your clients first about what are the issues they're hearing. Are investors asking them to report on ESG topics? Have they had a threatened shareholder resolution? Or even, are you even looking at going to the capital markets? Because going to the capital markets, particularly for smaller companies, whether it be for a green bond or to float an IPO or whatever, more and more investors are asking companies to have an ESG position. Go forward and say, And look, you don't need a 200-page sustainability report. You can just have, a position statement and maybe 5 or 6 pages on what are the important things for your company. So in terms of the innovation, I think for smaller firms and to mid-sized firms that maybe don't have any sort of ESG presence, they could simply look at the SASB materiality matrix. And that is a really nice tool that you can use to facilitate your conversations with clients to understand what are the potentially material issues for your industry. So SASB, SASB.org is the website. You can really just go there and download and understand that. The second thing is when you're ready, you can look to branch out. EY has done things like hire folks like me, who's not a CPA, to really help work in this area. It's that diversity of thought and opinion and experience that helps bring that sort of risk mitigation and innovation to a firm. Once you start digging deeper, it spurs more ideas to really just better help serve your client base.
That's a good point to end on, because I know at CPA.com, one of the, and with the AICPA even as well, one of the 4 kind of drivers, in particular, key drivers around the future of audit is new skills, right? And so new skills not only come from learning new things, but also bringing diverse skill sets, meaning, like you said, you're not a CPA, having people who have maybe a technical or a data science background or something along those lines. So, and all of that, more or less, it's almost like the formula that will help innovation kick itself off or begin to kick off within firms. And really, another thing you said too is talking to clients. That's come up on almost every call, every one of these conversations I've had. It doesn't matter how large a firm is. The better you understand a client situation and what's keeping them up at night and what's of concern. Sure, with publicly traded companies and EY, you're going to hear things like sustainability more often, but you're going to hear this. You could be surprised what you learn from a client as well. And it can just get you the information you need to start thinking a couple steps ahead, right? What could we be focusing on tomorrow that we aren't quite today that can really be a good opportunity? So I appreciate you bringing those thoughts to the table.
All right.
Yeah.
And on my closing note, I just urge your listeners to look at EY.com Sustainability Matters. That's our podcast series where we have interviews with companies, investors, legal analysts, and so forth to really help understand the landscape of ESG. So it's a nice place to go, a nice resource to look into, sort of short 25-minute podcast, get that diversity of thought, and really help spur your ideas around innovation.
Good deal, Rich. Thank you very much for joining me. I really appreciate it. And thank you all for listening in on the conversation. Hopefully you took some useful information away from it, and hope to see you on one of our future interviews. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.